Hello and welcome to the computer learning class by Accelerate Computer Systems. My name is Arun and I will be your trainer today. Today we are going to talk about IP addresses. IP address along with MAC or Media Access Control address is the backbone of networking. Communication is sent across the internet based on these two addresses. That is why it is important for us to learn about them. Let's dive in. We already know how packet of data is sent over the internet. However, I wanted to refresh it. Let's say that Julie, she's here. She is sitting in Canada and wants to communicate with Juliana, her friend in Australia. As we know that every computing device needs to have a MAC address like this, which is a fixed address assigned to that particular device, and an IP address like here, which is a dynamic address, as this IP address may change depending on various factors. You can see the IP addresses for Julie and Juliana, and the satellite receivers that you see here in the middle. They are actually the routers, the WAN routers. These routers, they route traffic across a wide area. Keep in mind that the IP addresses and MAC addresses given here are just for illustration purpose and to make it easy to explain, and the actual IP address and MAC address might be different. We know that the MAC addresses are actually 48 bits long, but here you see they are very short. I just wanted to keep them short. When a packet is sent from Julie, it contains the source IP address of Julie and destination IP address of Juliana, and source MAC address of Julie, her own computer, and destination MAC address of the next router. Note that during data transfer, the source and destination IP addresses, they remain unchanged. But the source and destination MAC addresses, they keep changing. For example, when Julie is sending the packet to the first router, her MAC address is the source and the next router's MAC address is the destination. Similarly, when the first router sends packet to the next one, it updates the source MAC address as its own and the destination MAC address as that of the next router, as you can see. When the final router forwards the packet to Juliana, it will use its own MAC address as source and Juliana's MAC address as destination. Keep in mind again that throughout this journey, the source and destination IP address, they remain unchanged. All right, now that we know the role of IP address and MAC address, let's have a look at the IP addresses in detail. Let's start with how an IP address looks like. Here we have an IPv4 address which is written in dotted decimal. In every language, this is a decimal number and dots are used to separate one byte from another. Keep in mind that 8 bits make 1 byte and 1 byte is the basic operable unit. Then we have this here. This is the IPv6 address which is written in hexadecimal. Before we talk about these in detail, let's have a look at our computer as to how we can find the IP address on our computer. Note that the IP address is also called the dynamic address of a computer. This is because this address might change depending on a lot of other factors. For example, if you're using your phone at home and you're using Wi-Fi, the IP address may be different than if you're using Wi-Fi at your local library. Now let's see how you can find the IP address on your computer. On your computer, you can either open a command prompt by typing cmd in the search box and then type ipconfig /all. You will see the IP address in the results. You might see both IP addresses, IPv4 as well as IPv6. There is another way to find out the IP address on your computer. If you are using Windows 10 or 11 on your computer, go to the internet connection icon, the computer icon for Ethernet or Wi-Fi icon, and right click and select Open Network and Internet Settings. That's here, right here. This will open another window. Once here, scroll down and click Change Adapter Settings. This one. On this page, right click on the adapter. Now you have these adapters here, either Wi-Fi or Ethernet. And then when you select property, in this new pop-up, scroll down and you will see property options for IPv4 as well as IPv6 right here. Another way to check IP address would be via control panel. On your computer, search and open control panel right here and search for network here. Once you see network and sharing center, click the view network connections. Here you will see all the adapters, just like in the other one. You will see all the adapters here, either Wi-Fi or Ethernet. You can right click on any of these and select properties. In the new pop-up, you have the option to view IPv4 or IPv6 address details, like here. All right. I just wanted to highlight something important. Under properties, you do not see any IP address here in this case. Instead, you see the selection obtain an IP address automatically. This simply means that in the background, the DHCP or Dynamic Host Control Protocol server is working, and the computer takes or obtains the IP address from this server on lease, which also means that the computer may not always have the same IP address all the time. Now, this is called a dynamic address. We will talk about the DHCP server later in detail in one of the future videos. If you want, you can click on use the following IP address and enter the required address here. In that case, we will enter an IP address for the computer. This is called a static IP address. If the IP address is provided by DHCP, it is called dynamic. Before we go to the next slide, let us understand a very important concept that allows networking to function seamlessly. To be able to direct traffic easily, there is something called as a network and a host. Let's try and understand this concept with the help of an illustration. Let's look at this building. It has different offices on each floor. They have an internet connection cable from the internet service provider. To ensure that every company is able to send communication separately, the company managing the building will set up routers on each floor, each of these floors. Keep in mind that routers are used for managing different networks. Each of these routers will be connected to switches, which connect to the individual computers. This way, the routers, they create different networks, and switches connect to hosts or end computers. That way, the hosts can easily talk to each other, share files, etc. within one network, which is restricted to one floor. Networks are used to segregate traffic. In some cases, if the company has several departments, they might want to segregate traffic for each department, thus ensuring that every department traffic is separated, which also helps in ensuring security of the data. Here's a brief history of IP addressing and how it evolved from the beginning where it is now to where it is now. When internet started, there were a few computers. IP address scheme was devised. The creators, they took the number from 1 to 255 and divided them into different categories or classes. But the question is why the numbers from 1 to 255 were selected and why not some other number? The answer lies in the smallest operable unit with which computers work, which is a byte, which is 8 bits. Have you already watched the video where we explained what is a bit and a byte, and the one that explains binary number system? If not, please watch them to be able to understand this better. Computers, they process 8 bits or 1 byte together as one unit. In binary, every number has a place value. If we add the place value of all these 8 bits, we will get the number 255. So if you add 128, 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, 1, you will get 255. Thus, this number was divided into different groups or classes of IP addresses, which were meant to be used for different purposes. Class A, it starts with 1.0.0.0 and goes up to 127.255.255.255. Now, this was meant for companies that have a large number of end users. The second category was from 128.0.0.0 up to 191.255.255.255. Class C contains addresses from 192.0.0.0 to 223.255.255.255. Class D is from 224.0.0.0 to 239.255.255.255. This range is used for multicast, and the address class E is a reserved class. General public cannot use it. Important to note that in an IP address, every number separated by a dot is called an octet. Remember that no two computers can have same IP address. Initially, the entire octet used to be assigned to computers or group of computers because there were less computers. This meant that a total of 254 hosts can be assigned using one octet. At that time, the entire octet was assigned to hosts, even if there were only 10 hosts or n computers in a company or a department. This meant that remaining 244 IP addresses could not be used elsewhere, and thus it was a waste. Internet started expanding, and we started seeing more and more computers across the globe. Now, there was a need to have more IP addresses for hosts. But remember that only a certain number of IPs were available, and there was a need to more effectively use the IPs which were available at that point of time. As a result, it was decided that instead of assigning the entire octet, it is a good idea to assign only so many IP addresses to a company that are required. Now this worked and was in use for some time, but slowly the IP addresses were getting exhausted. There were situations where many companies had hundreds of users in the company, and every computer had one IP assigned. Since more and more computers were getting connected to the internet, again, people managing internet had to come up with a plan to avoid depletion of IPs. So now they came up with the idea of public and private IP. They specified a certain number of IP ranges which can be used for computers internally within a company or house, but cannot be used to connect to the networks outside. First range of IP address is from 10.0.0.0 to 10.255.255.255. The second range is from 172.16.0.0 to 172.31.255.255. And the third range is from 192.168.0.0 to 192.168.255.255. And this is why, if you are at home, you would normally see your IP address something similar to 192.168.0.10 or 1.10, and your neighbor might also have the same IP. But didn't we say that no two computers can have similar IP? And now that every house will have similar IP addressing and some computers will have the same IP, how will that work? While communicating with external networks, the router at your home will not use your private IP address to identify your computer. Instead, a combination of your private IP address and the public IP address will be used. We will discuss this in detail in one of the future videos. Now, this solution of public and private IP addresses, it worked well for some time. But these days, we have so many phones and home appliances, IoT connected to internet. To avoid future issues, a new IP addressing scheme has been developed, which is called IPv6. Now, IPv4 had about 4 billion IP addresses, whereas the IPv6 has these many unique IPs. These many, and I'm not even sure how to say that such a large number. Hopefully these many IP addresses will be enough for us for future, considering that several household devices are these days connecting to the internet. But time will tell. Keep in mind that currently we are using IPv4 as well as IPv6, and we are slowly transitioning towards IPv6. We talked about the history of IP address and how it evolved and the changes happened. Here's an interesting site if you want to visit. That's www.rfc-editor.org. It may be too early for you to be visiting this site, but if you are very new to networking, but I thought of mentioning it here because this site contains requests to make changes to networking. So whenever some changes are to be made in networking and how computers talk to each other, now these requests are made here. So you will find all the documentation, requests, specification, etc. on this site. This site tells you that internet is a continuous development, and another fact that there is no magic happening when it comes to computers. There is rather a logic behind everything that a computer does. Today we have only been introduced to IP addressing. We also talked about its brief history and how we completed a journey from IPv4 to IPv6. We will continue with the discussion about IP address in some of the future videos because it's a very vast topic. But we will take our time and talk about the subtopics one by one with examples, visuals, etc. If you found this video helpful, do share it with your friends and family. Do consider subscribing to get notified about new videos that we publish. At Accelerate, we work with students and startup companies in Canada by providing them with high performance and low cost computing devices to help them learn and grow. These Dell laptops, they start at just $400. If you would like to know more about how you can save on your next laptop purchase, do send us an email. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, happy learning.